Okay, so I was contemplating the nature of the universe as one does late last night, and there was this quote that I read, and I don't remember where it's from. So if you know, maybe you can tell me. But I'm gonna be paraphrasing it really hard, so maybe it's hard to track down. But um, I mean, it was something like, oh, aliens or extraterrestrials have been among us this whole time. They've been observing us, but they won't visit us because we're not ready, right? But they will make contact with us once we actually understand the true nature of space and something else. I forgot the something else, but well, what really struck out to me was like the quote, was along the lines of understanding what space really is, and I was like, well, what do you mean what space really is? Space is just, I mean, space is space. It's like vacuum. There's nothing there, right? Or is there? Maybe there's something more that we haven't really contemplated. So I really started thinking about it, and as synchronistically as you would have it, I was emailing this psychologist guy, called Dan, great guy, and he was like, yeah, we were just sharing experiences, and he was saying how, in his dark times of his life, he really found, I suppose, light and energy and life, from that darkness. And and if it wasn't for going into the darkness, he wouldn't have been able to find his light, kind of thing, right? And I was like, well, that's really interesting. Then I was like, whoa, hang on a fucking minute. Like, in physical reality, right? It's mostly darkness. It's mostly space. Like, if you look at the entire fucking universe, right? Like, we go into outer space. Like, it's mostly space. Like, the planets and, like, stars, it's like a mind. It's like, yeah, it's like dots on this, like, massive black canvas, right? It's like a majority of it is just darkness. And so that got me thinking. I'm like, well, what if space is like mud, right? It's like soil, right? For for life to spring forth, it's like when the Big Bang happened and all these fucking things sprung into the air. It was mostly darkness, right? And you had like a few elements, and then they started combining and combining, combining, and over billions of years, here we are, human beings watching this video, making this video. We have consciousness. We've evolved from the very primitive piece of stardust into something, somewhat more advanced, shall we say. So then, if we take the analogy that space is like mud, in which, seeds of life get sprung upon, gets planted and sprung upon, such as us, for example, or any life, or planets, or whatever, in the mud, then it's like, what are we growing into, Like, if you plant a seed into the mud, it spreads its roots, and the seed, it might come out into a flower or something, right? Like, there would be roots in the mud, right? But then ultimately where it wants to go is up to the surface and spring forth into the flower and bathe in the sun, and it's like now it sees this whole other world, right? It's like the mud level is actually very small compared to the rest of the world outside when the flower actually springs forth, right? And then it got me thinking again. So this is me fucking, 1 a.m. in the morning, right? Like, we know that dark matter exists, right? And it's like a majority of the universe. I did a quick wiki before I made this video, and, in the Wikipedia page, it was saying how dark matter is like 85% of the universe, and it's like, well, we still don't know what dark matter is. We just know that based on calculations, there needs to be something, like a placeholder, which we will call dark matter, in order for the universe and the laws of physics to exist the way they are, right? But we don't know what the fuck dark matter is or where it is, right? And then it got me thinking, like, maybe, now this is, like, really out there, perhaps, but maybe dark matter is, like, the outside world with the trees and the sun for us, and we're still in the mud. So we're still in space, we're still in the mud, and we haven't actually broke through the mud yet. That's why everything around us is all dark, right? There isn't like angelic beings of light and like, iridescent angels flying all over us. No, it's mostly just darkness, right? And it's because we're still underground. We're still in the mud trying to grow. And you know, we're trying really hard to explore this mud, this darkness. You know, we're making spaceships to Mars and stuff like that, and you know, that's all very well and good in a, you know, in a 3D physical landscape. It's like we're trying really hard to explore the 3D. We're trying to get to the surface, right? We're trying to get into the sunlight. But all we're doing right now is kind of exploring sideways. We haven't actually gone up, right? Yeah, it's like, you know, even if we get amazing spaceships to go to Mars and different planets, we're still in the mud. We're just exploring the mud. Like, we've gotten really good at exploring the mud, the darkness within here, but we still haven't actually fully transcended beyond the mud, you know, and break past, you know, into the heavens, shall we say. And perhaps that heavens is dark matter. And now you think about it, like, the stuff above the ground is a lot more than the stuff beneath the ground. Which would make sense if we were gonna go by the fact that the majority of the universe is dark matter. And it's like, well, in this analogy, it wouldn't be dark matter. It would be like light matter, because it would like be the light, because the space is the darkness, right? But it's like, well, if building amazing spaceships and going to different planets and different galaxies is not gonna allow us to get into the heavens, then what is? Then now this is where maybe it goes to another level of radical, like, woo-woo-ness, but I believe it's a raise of our consciousness. Whew, okay, so we won't get into the realm of light, you know, above ground, into the land of the heavens, the promised land, Asgard, or whatever, right? By building awesome spaceships. We can only get there through raising our consciousness to the point where we can actually perceive another dimension that's beyond ours. It's like, if we only use 3D tools to try and find, like, let's say 4D things, you can, because the 3D tools only work on 3D, but the only way to increase ourselves to like 4D or whatever, right, is it has to start from within, you know, like a raise in consciousness, our vibration, our frequency, like all that. I don't want to make it sound too woo-woo-y, but I feel like there's no other way I can ground this. There are two videos that I'm going to show you that I feel like explains kind of maybe the fourth dimension quite well. So the first video is from this series called Dr. Quantum. Some of you might have seen it. The video is called Flatland. And basically it's like Dr. Quantum's a 3D dude, but then he finds this like reality where there's these beings on a 2D land, and basically they can only see in 2D, so everything is 2D. So when he puts his finger through their like 2D plane, right, they can't see the finger, they can only see like the cross section of the finger, like a splice of the finger going through.
I said to Ray, where's Dottie? He said, well, she's out in line.
What the bleep is that thing? Huh?
From their 2D perspective, my 3D finger looks something like this.
What the letter does that?
Similarly, I believe fourth dimensional things would have the same effect on our 3D world, where we can perceive a part of it as it moves, but not really knowing what it is and not realizing how big that 4D thing actually is in a 3D world. And well, I guess my theory is that the bigness of the universe comes from the 4D aspect, which is the majority of it, and we can only perceive a tiny bit of it. Another example is from this game called Miegakure, and it's like it's really trippy actually. So it's basically, it's a 3D game, right? 3D models. Well, it's a 3D game, but when you play it, obviously you're seeing a representation of 3D on a 2D screen, right? But the character in the 3D game and the world is moving through a fourth dimension. So the player gets to change like the 4D objects in the 3D plane, and you'll kind of see it kind of doing these trippy things.
The world we're building in Miegakure is a world in which there are 4 spatial dimensions instead of 3. In this game, the 4th dimension is not time, but the 4th dimension of space that works just like the first 3 dimensions we're familiar with. So, at first games were only 2D and only took place along 2 directions. Then computers became powerful enough to render 3D graphics, and this allowed for full 3D movement. Of course, the graphics we see while they are computed in 3D are actually displayed on a 2D screen. They are projected down from 3D to 2D in a way that mimics how our eyes perceive the 3rd dimension. But it doesn't doesn't stop there. If in a 2D game every object's position is represented in a computer using 2 numbers, and if in a 3D game every object's position is represented using 3 numbers, what if each position was represented using 4 numbers? In other words, what if there was another direction you can move along in addition to the first 3? Trying to answer this question is what led us to develop this game. However, as far as we know, our universe has exactly 3 spatial dimensions, so it's difficult for us to picture what a 4-dimensional world would look like. But a computer, on the other hand, does not care. It's just working with numbers as usual. So we had to come up with a way to display this calculated 4D world so that our 3-dimensional brains could comprehend it. The way we chose is a method that has been popularized in the novella Flatland. This novella talks about a 2D square that can only see a 2D cross-section of a 3D world. For the square, the 3rd dimension is invisible and mysterious. The square has no concept of it because it is stuck seeing a 2D world. If a 3D object visits the 2D plane, it appears to be deforming. In Miigakure, a similar process happens, but in one higher dimension. Instead of taking a 2D slice of 3D objects, we are taking a 3D slice of 4D objects. It's hard to imagine, but luckily we don't have to. A computer can just display it for us. Surprisingly, in this scene, every crystal is the exact same shape, only facing different directions and slightly longer or shorter. And yet they all look so different because you only see a slice of each of them.
Essentially, we currently only have the capability to perceive 3D things, and then when 4D things come, we can only see a splice of it, a fraction of it. And that 4D thing could be massive. It could be this huge thing looming over us, superimposed onto 3D reality, but we only see a slice of it, thinking that's all there is when there's actually a lot more. So basically, I guess my crazy thesis at 1 in the morning was, well, we're living in a 3D world that is a part of a much bigger 4D world that we can only perceive a part of it, right? We're only in the mud of it, kind of thing, you know, mud of the whole world. And the only way to get through the mud of space, of darkness, is to raise our consciousness, not through building more technology, because that just allows us to explore and control the mud better, right? But through raising our consciousness, our vibration, our frequency, our evolution of our human being, whatever that may look like. Maybe we won't be able to do it within one lifetime. Maybe it'll take a lot of lifetimes. Maybe it won't. I don't know. But we need to evolve our like core essence of what we are, of an infinite being, a soul, right? In this world. And then the more we evolve that, the more we are able to perceive more things, and then we can actually break through space into a bigger dimension, whether that's, you know, the 4th dimension, whatever you want to call it, like the land above the mud, above the ground. You know, maybe that's what heaven or whatever, the promised land, Asgard, like all of those things like is, right? Is, you know, and maybe we get there when we die regardless, so you don't need to do anything. But I guess the fun thing is trying to get there, trying to raise ourselves so high, you know, into our infinite godlike self, that we can do it while we are alive. Evolve so hard that we can break through the darkness and into the bigger thing. And maybe when we get to the bigger thing, there's a bigger thing above that. There's like a 5D above that, right? And then it's like you got to keep raising your consciousness until you expand to, I don't know, like all the dimensions, the highest dimensions of dimensions. Then, I don't know, maybe you become God then. Then you can see everything. You're all seeing, you know. Well, yeah, you'll be omni everything, right? Because you can see and be and do everything at once because you're on that level. So that's kind of my little thought that I had, that I wanted to share about what space and dark matter is, and I hope you found that interesting. If you have any comments regarding that, feel free to leave it down below, or any crazy theories of your own that you've thought of, you know, happy to discuss. Other than that, keep increasing your consciousness, and hopefully we'll get somewhere like that's really cool.